Hello, and welcome to the Skirball Cultural Center's presentation of Star Trek Exploring New Worlds. This exhibition was organized by the Museum of Pop Culture in Seattle, Washington, and we are just thrilled to have this chance to share it with you now. Star Trek's optimistic, inclusive vision of the future resonates deeply with the Skirball Cultural Center's mission. Guided by the Jewish value of welcoming the stranger, the Skirball presents exhibitions and programs that foster human connections, celebrate hope and discovery, and help to build a more just society. When Star Trek first aired over 50 years ago, the United States was deeply marked by racial inequity and the civil rights movement growing in response to those inequities. Star Trek imagined a future in which people of all backgrounds work together peacefully as equals. In the decades since, Star Trek's popularity has spanned continents and generations. Its vision has had real positive impacts on our world. Join us as we explore artifacts from over 50 years of Star Trek, including costumes, props, storyboards, filming models, and more. Learn more about the creation of Star Trek, including its barrier-breaking inclusive cast. Meet characters from different series who demonstrate the value of diverse perspectives and abilities. And discover the impact that Star Trek has had on real-life technology and pop culture. Let us boldly go into Star Trek Exploring New Worlds.
When Star Trek premiered on national television in 1966, it boldly envisioned a future where anyone, no matter what they looked like or where they came from, could explore the stars. In the 1960s, competing space programs in the United States and the Soviet Union captivated the imaginations of millions with the excitement of exploration and new technological marvels. But back on Earth, conflict and inequality were pervasive. The civil rights movement and the Vietnam War sharply divided Americans along political lines. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 had just granted all Americans equal protection under the law, but equal treatment in public life was still a distant hope for women and BIPOC communities. Star Trek's creator, Gene Roddenberry, wanted to see racial and gender equality become a reality. He was able to explore many of the social questions of the 1960s by creating a story set in the distant future. That way, he could have an integrated, multiracial cast and storylines that paralleled the challenges of life on Earth. As Roddenberry said, "I have no belief that Star Trek depicts the actual future. It depicts us, now." Star Trek showed viewers that another world was possible.
I was thrilled to be cast on Star Trek, but now looking back on the 55 years, we really appreciate what a profoundly important show Gene Roddenberry created.
Gene Roddenberry's original vision of unity and humanity working together in concert and in harmony is something that speaks to every generation and always has and always will. I think it's a level of hopefulness and optimism that we need.
There's such despair in the world, and I think people really need to escape. So science fiction not only provides that, but I think it can be very educational, and it can provide a roadmap for how we can move forward together in a way that's not going to be destructive to ourselves and our planet.
Star Trek's inclusive casting broke new ground in Hollywood. When Nichelle Nichols appeared on Star Trek from 1966 to 1969 as Lieutenant Nyota Uhura, communications officer aboard the USS Enterprise, she was the first Black woman to be cast in a prominent leadership role on television. Alongside Lieutenant Hikaru Sulu, played by Japanese-American actor George Takei, Lieutenant Uhura was part of the future that Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry envisioned, where humans had overcome intolerant attitudes based on race and ethnicity, and celebrated infinite diversity in infinite combinations.
You know, Star Trek has a couple different layers, and when a lot of people see Star Trek, especially from the 60s, they see a very diverse cast aboard the bridge, and that was critical back then. But what was sort of the next layer down was they weren't on a ship looking for weird-looking aliens. They were out exploring the galaxy, looking for intelligent creatures that looked at the universe in a unique and different way.
It's really groundbreaking if you think about that, the diversity that Star Trek has shown over the years. And even on my show, I mean, the first Native American character. I mean, there's so many firsts on Star Trek.
I think the secret to the longevity of Star Trek is that we continue to inspire the human race to live up to its potential. We present the people who inhabit this world. We need to be reminded of what we're capable of, and that if we apply ourselves, we can solve some of these problems. But we have to see each other first.
Previously, TV roles for people of color had been limited to minor characters. Star Trek set a new example. Uhura and Sulu became role models for fans of color to see themselves as leaders. Among Uhura's fans was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. When Nichelle Nichols was thinking about leaving the show to return to her singing career, Dr. King persuaded her to stay on and continue to inspire young people by showing them a Black woman in space. After the original Star Trek series ended, Nichols harnessed her star power to recruit more diverse real-life astronauts and scientists. She made promotional appearances to encourage people of color and women to join NASA. Among those she recruited were Air Force Colonel Guyon Bluford, the first African-American man to become an astronaut, Dr. Sally Ride, the first American woman to become an astronaut, and Dr. Mae Jemison, the first African-American woman to do so.
I think there's a lot of fans out there that see themselves and may have gone through things in their life, and then they see the hope we were talking about, the optimism, and they realize that there is something bigger than what they have been immersed in.
Gene Roddenberry's vision included encounters with alien societies that allowed Star Trek to explore themes of cultural difference. Jewish actor Leonard Nimoy played the half-human, half-Vulcan Spock, the science officer aboard the USS Enterprise. Like the other interstellar societies on Star Trek, Vulcans have their own culture and values, skills, abilities, and weaknesses. Spock's composed Vulcan cool was a calm foil to the emotional, action-oriented, human Captain Kirk. Spock also brought elements of Vulcan culture to the USS Enterprise, like the iconic Vulcan salute, "Live long and prosper." Gene Roddenberry encouraged Star Trek cast members to bring aspects of their diverse backgrounds to their roles. Leonard Nimoy drew on his own Jewish background to create the Vulcan greeting. The Vulcan salute is based on a priestly benediction used in some Jewish communities to bless the congregation.
Star Trek has a legacy of creating heroes that we can aspire to be, partly because Star Trek heroes are flawed. They're real, and we can see ourselves in those heroes because we know that we don't have to be perfect. The writing in this show is so consistently powerful and human.
In Star Trek: The Next Generation, which ran from 1987 to 1994, Star Trek's vision of inclusion expanded with Chief Engineer Geordi LaForge. Played by actor LeVar Burton, LaForge was the first recurring character with a disability. Born blind, he wears a prosthetic device called a visor, or visual instrument and sensory organ replacement. With it, he can see beyond the range of ordinary human sight across the electromagnetic spectrum, but it is also painful for him to wear. Gene Roddenberry and DC Fontana created the character of Geordi LaForge to honor Star Trek superfan George LaForge. The real-life LaForge was quadriplegic and lived with muscular dystrophy, which sadly claimed his life in 1975. On Star Trek: The Next Generation, Geordi LaForge makes important contributions to the crew, primarily through his talent as an engineer, as well as through the skills that he developed to adapt to his disability. In the late 1980s, at a time when the Americans with Disabilities Act had not yet become law, LaForge demonstrated the leadership roles people with disabilities play in the workplace. As the captain of the USS Voyager, Kathryn Janeway was the first female Starfleet captain to lead a Star Trek series. Janeway's strengths include deep scientific and emotional intelligence, concern for crew morale, and an ability to remain calm in even the worst circumstances, like when her ship and crew are flung so far across the galaxy that it will take decades for them to return home. Played by actress Kate Mulgrew, Janeway was a groundbreaking character in the 90s. During this time, women increasingly took on leadership roles in previously male-dominated professions. A cultural backlash grew, fueled by insulting and pervasive stereotypes of women as overly emotional and not meant for leadership in fields like the sciences. Kate Mulgrew and the writers of Star Trek Voyager, which ran from 1995 through 2001, pushed back against these stereotypes. Captain Janeway demonstrated her capabilities as both a brilliant scientist and a tactically savvy commander. Like Lieutenant Uhura, Captain Janeway inspired a new generation of women to enter careers in science and leadership.
The first female president is going to be someone who has watched Voyager, is what I feel that's going to catapult them into that.
I feel like any convention I go to, I'm always hearing about how oftentimes people got into the profession they got into, especially if it's like they're now an astronaut or something. It's because they saw space and saw what life could be. And I've had the honor of meeting a lot of people who have connected with my character, seeing themselves represented. This show and this franchise has given people that place to really just be themselves.
In Star Trek, the Klingons demonstrate that even enemy groups can overcome conflict to become allies and friends. In the original Star Trek series from the late 1960s, the Klingons and the United Federation of Planets are locked in a conflict in which neither can gain the upper hand, much like the Cold War tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union. And much like the way Soviet culture was cast in American media, the Klingons were portrayed in the original series as villains without much nuance. From their first encounter, Klingons fight mercilessly against Starfleet, finally resulting in a fragile peace after a lengthy stalemate. In later series like Star Trek The Next Generation and Star Trek Deep Space Nine, the Klingons become a key ally of humanity. Klingon Starfleet officers like Worf and B'Elanna Torres bring cultural values of bravery, honor, and integrity that complement facets of humanity.
It's a great example in what Trek has always done with other species is show, yes, this culture is different, but it doesn't make it inferior or superior. It just means it's different, and we have to learn how to work with that.
Throughout the Star Trek series and films, that respect for the uniqueness of all cultures is a fundamental value. The character of Data from Star Trek The Next Generation, played by Brent Spiner, offers an outsider's perspective on what it takes to be human. Data is an android, a sentient, computerized artificial intelligence in a synthetic humanoid form. He looks human, but he's not. In order to work more effectively with his human crewmates, Data studies their behaviors, emotional responses, and cultural practices. He even tries to adopt them himself. Data cares for his pet cat, learns to paint, tries to understand what makes jokes funny, and masters the art of playing poker. He becomes close friends with Geordi LaForge, in part because LaForge treats him as a sentient equal, not as an unfeeling, computerized piece of equipment. Data's quest to develop his own sense of humanity and the relationships he builds with his crewmates pose the question, what does it truly mean to be human?
I've claimed the term Roddenberry character because there's one in every series, at least one. Of course, we had Spock, we had Data, 7 of 9, the Hologram Doctor. All of these characters are the non-human characters, but they always show us our humanity. They're the things that ask the questions that we take for granted every day. So when Data says something, I've never known what it means to feel touch on my skin, it makes you think a little. Having a new perspective on something helps you grow and helps you sort of reconnect with those things that we don't always think about.
Now, after more than 55 years, Star Trek has become deeply embedded in society. It is endlessly referenced in pop culture. Political leaders take inspiration in strategies used by Starfleet. Scientists are inspired to create new inventions based on Star Trek's technologies for communication and medical care, among other things. Artists, musicians, and designers create homages to its characters and worlds. Its enormous fan community is inclusive and vibrant.
I mean, how many shows have lasted this many years and given birth to so many children and now grandchildren? 55 years, and that's an amazing achievement.
For somebody who as a boy wanted to change my ears to look like Spock, it's very exciting to be on board and to be part of the Star Trek story.
It's stories like Star Trek that inspire people to do the right thing, to hear the call to justice in our own minds and hearts, because we see that in the heroes we love on screen, and we know we can do that too.
You know, as someone who started their career as a first, right? I was the first openly gay teenager on network television. I know how important it is for people to see themselves and the effect that that has on their lives, to understand that you're not the only one, to know that people like you are capable of great things, to see them do those great things right in front of you, allows you to dream a bigger dream for yourself. Star Trek has been that since the beginning, with George Takei, Nichelle Nichols, LeVar Burton. But on Star Trek Discovery, we take it to another level. Everyone who hasn't been seen up until this point needs to know that they deserve to be seen too, and that they make it to the future.
Star Trek's vision of an inclusive, utopian future continues to resonate with new generations. It allows us to see ourselves among the stars in all our diversity, meeting every challenge with bravery and thoughtfulness. Thank you for joining us for this deeper look at Star Trek Exploring New Worlds. Live long and prosper.